And welcome back to Jeff Koinange Live, straight to the bench and the Grand Mullah. Senior Counsel Ahmed Nasir Abdullahi, our guest tonight. He says he's on neither side of the Jubilee divide, but he admits Jubilee is in a big fight for its political life, and it's messy, it's ugly, and the gloves are off. So, Grand Mullah, let me ask you this. The purge going on in Jubilee right now. Senators Murkomen, Kihika are out. Deputy Speaker Kithure Kindiki could be out as soon as Friday. Is this house cleaning, or is this targeting one side of the divide?
I mean, it's an interesting question to answer because, or to ask rather, because I think the more interesting thing really is what is the purpose of this? What is the end result of this? I mean, okay, fair enough. Murkomen has been fairly critical of the government. He has been removed. The deputy speaker may be removed this Friday. But what's the purpose other than punishing them? I mean, you know, if they were a stumbling block to the government agenda, or they have made the government lose a lot of bills or debates in House, I will have understood the rationale for their removal. But I mean, Jubilee hasn't lost a single motion in the House, in the Senate or the House. They haven't lost a single bill. I mean, whatever the government's agenda has been executed. So, what's the purpose other than maybe just punishing or driving a point or flexing someone's muscle?
Okay. By the way, Murkomen says his removal as majority leader is unlawful. Your thoughts?
Actually, the more interesting question is whether that position exists in the Constitution. I mean, where, you know, in the National Assembly, I mean, dualist position is specifically provided for in the Constitution. I don't think you have such a similar position in the Senate in the first place.
Okay, so let's talk about Deputy President William Ruto. Grand Mullah, in your opinion, is he under siege?
That may be an understatement. Of course, he is under siege. I think to anybody who observes Kenyan politics, the president doesn't speak, but a lot of his action puts the deputy president in a very difficult positions.
So, what could he have done to anger his boss so much to put him in the position he's in?
I mean, that's $1 million question. I have no idea. Nobody has any idea. Maybe only the president. And some time back, I tweeted about this. I said that, you know, the president will make a lot of sense, and Kenyans probably will even understand or even support. If he makes it open and say that, you know, I have fallen out with my deputy president, these are the reasons. I think they are valid reasons. Everybody should know from right now that we are no longer together. I mean, we can't. I mean, you know, they can't fight so viciously, then pretend or remain so silent, both of them. I think it's decent enough for them to tell everybody else that, you know, I mean, this is over. I mean, it happens. We want to be honest with Kenyans. We don't like one another anymore. We are going our own ways, rather than, you know, this clock and this, you know, fights or stabbing one another in the dark in the middle of the night.
Grand Mullah, I have to ask you this, because, look, a few years ago, the president and his deputy, were bosom buddies. They were wearing similar shirts with similar ties. They were rolling up their sleeves. They looked like, you know, these guys were the best of friends. What do you think went wrong?
But, you know, all marriages are like that. I mean, when you are newly married, you know, you are happy, smile every time together with your spouse, or, you know, I mean, that was a political marriage, and something has happened. Nobody knows what it is. It's for the president to tell us, I think, because it's the president, you know, who is pulling. It's the president who has the cards, actually. It's not Ruto who has, you know, pulled the strings or anything. I think the onus really is on the president to square up with Kenyans and tell us what the problem is. I don't think he can just keep quiet and, you know, shuffle the deck at dark hours of the night or early morning. And I think he has a duty to Kenyans to tell us that, you know, everything with him and the deputy president is not right. And as someone who is responsible to the rest of Kenyans, as someone who was elected by the majority of Kenyans, there's nothing wrong. I think people will understand. But I think it is a high time for the president to tell Kenyans what is wrong between him and the deputy president.
Okay, fair point. Look, we are 2 years away from the next presidential election. Is it sustainable if this marriage is over? Is it sustainable to fight Ruto for the next 2 years straight?
No, I think one thing we have to make clear is that the president is fighting the dispute between him and his deputy. It's not legal. It's not constitutional, because the constitution is very clear on the respective roles. And the president really has nothing, or he can't do anything against his deputy in terms of the constitution. What he is doing is political, games that are basically political. Removing his guys who he thinks are very close to Ruto. But in terms of the constitution, Ruto's position is secure. And some of the things, the president is doing with the opposition, with Raila, with all these things, they are completely against the constitution. It's actually a complete breach of the constitution. If you read the constitution very clear, the constitution says, for example, that it's only the deputy president that can deputize the president. If the president is not attending a function, it's only the deputy president who can deputize him. For example, if the president was supposed to go to, the AU summit in Addis Ababa and he can't make it, it's only the deputy president. That's what the constitution is. So the president is politically bypassing the deputy president, but in the process, and I hope Kenyans get this very clear, the president is actually breaking very fundamental provisions of the constitutions, especially when it comes to the executive.
Okay, so when it comes to talk of impeachment, if the president's side has the numbers, is that not going to happen? It just can't happen?
No, impeachment is a constitutional process. There are certain thresholds. It can happen, but I don't think anybody has the numbers to impeach anybody. I don't think the president or the opposition, if they unite, can impeach the deputy president as things stand now. It may change 6 months down the road, or a year down the road. But I think impeachment also is too radical. It's too polarizing. I don't think the president will take such a step.
Grand Mullah, I'm sure you've read the 48 laws of power, and one of the laws is never outshine your boss. Do you think that happened in this case? Did the deputy outshine his boss?
From what we can read, what we can see, Jeff, you are Kenyan. You see everything. Tell us if he has, if he has outshone him. I haven't seen it myself.
Okay. There's also the case of the curse of the deputy president, or back then, vice president. Are we seeing that in this case?
Jeff, I've said this so many times, and I think it's a valid point I always make. The president has no obligation to support his deputy for 2022. He has no obligation. There is no duty. Okay, he made some promises in some rallies, but I think everybody will understand if the president says that, no, I'm cutting my loss with this guy. I'm not supporting him. That's a fair point. And I think people will understand. And I think even Ruto will understand if Uhuru tells him, William, I'm not supporting you anymore. But I think there's a decent way to do that thing. There's a nice way of doing that. And then there's this kind of fight, we are seeing now. It doesn't look nice. It doesn't look smart. It doesn't look decent. I think they can handle the difference in a more sophisticated manner. And I think these are guys who are very sophisticated. If they want to handle something, in a civil manner, in a decent manner, they can do. But, the charade, the spectacle they are displaying to Kenyans, it's beneath them, in my view.
Okay, you're a senior part of Jubilee, Grand Mullah. Why don't you advise them? Why don't you tell them what you're telling the rest of us?
No, I'm not a senior. I don't hold any position in Jubilee. I'm what we call in law an officious bystander, someone who stands and sees things as they unfold.
Okay, let's come back to the deputy president's office. Is it just a big office with no powers?
No. Actually, the deputy president, under the constitution, it's a very powerful office. I mean, he is the deputy to the president. He is the principal assistant to the president. He exercises, the president does not exercise executive powers alone. He exercises with the assistance of the deputy president. So it's a very powerful position. But I mean, although the constitution really insulates it or empowers it, again, at the end of the day, it needs some chemistry, some rapport with the president. If the president, just, for example, stops talking to the deputy president, I mean, the deputy president cannot force the president to talk to him.
All right, let me ask you this, Grand Mullah. All the attacks directed at the deputy president, all these hard tackles, aren't they going to win him sympathy out there in Mashinani, Hustler Nation versus dynasties? At the end of the day, it's the people who decide. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a very important point. There are two ways to look in. First, the Jubilee government is not a very popular government. It's not very popular with the Kenyans now. I mean, it hasn't achieved a lot. It has underperformed. There's a lot of corruption scandal. Kenyans are struggling. The economy has tanked. The rule of law is weak. The judiciary is under siege. When a government that is not popular fights someone in the politics, like the deputy president, there is an upsurge in sympathy votes. But it's still 2 years down the road. I mean, if this happened 6 months to election, it will have been a big factor. The sympathy factor will have been, rising up. But now 2 years down the road, we don't know whether that sympathy will still be there or not. There's a lot of things that can unfold in 2 years' time.
Absolutely. I mean, look, Kenyans, we're always in election mode, if you will, campaign mode. And there's talk now that it could start very soon. I mean, first referendum and then campaigns. Isn't that too premature?
No, it is true. I mean, I agree with you. We go through an election, then we start the next election cycle immediately. And that's the unfortunate thing about this country. But that's the way it is. I mean, if you look at the Jubilee, if you look at the opposition, I mean, they have been in an election mode right from the time the results were announced. It's a cultural problem. It's part of our life.
Yeah, it is indeed. What is the end game here, Grand Mullah? Is it a coalition government, bring in Gideon, Raila, Mudavadi, Kalonzo, Isaac Ruto, bring them all in the hopes of what? Getting the numbers?
That's another important thing to note. Under our system, this is a presidential system. It's not a parliamentary system. A parliamentary system, like India, Britain or Israel, have a lot of, coalition governments where parties from different sides come together. But in a presidential system like Kenya, the president cannot share executive authority with members from another political party because he was elected with a formula of 50+1. Once you are elected with that formula of 50+1, you cannot go now to the opposition and say that, oh, I want to bring you to the executive arm of government. The constitution prohibits that kind of government. So if the president now says that, for example, that I will bring Gideon to be, or Nick Salat to be a minister for X, or Raila to bring, or Kalonzo, or Mudavadi, that is completely prohibited in the constitution.
So talk of a coalition government?
Constitutionally, it's a non-starter, but who cares about the constitution in this country? I mean, it's more observed in breach than observance.
Someone once said, you go against Ruto at your own peril.
I mean, Ruto is he's an important player in the politics of Kenya, but looks like, from a political point of view, the president has a lot of cards to play in this war.
And what's the end game? Is Ruto's goose cooked or no? Are they going to go all the way? Will they stay together until 2022?
But, in terms of the politics of the future, if you look at the main players of this country, especially, the president, if you look at Raila, if you look at Ruto, in terms of the future, in my view, the president looks, the person who is at the weakest position. And Raila and Ruto have more cards to play, especially in relation to 2022, because the president will retire. I mean, he has power to exercise this year and just probably 2021. And even 2021, you know, I mean, I think from June, I mean, we'll be in an election mode. I mean, coalition will be formed and nomination will start after that. So the president's powers are quickly disappearing as time goes. He has a lot of powers in terms of what he can do now, in terms of, you know, appointing someone somewhere or removing someone or, you know, exercising the full executive authority. But he's a man who lives more in the past and in the present. The future, I don't think the future belongs to Uhuru. The future, I think, belongs to Ruto. It belongs to Raila. It belongs to the other politicians. Uhuru's powers is the present and a little bit in the midterm.
Okay, speaking of Raila, you just mentioned him, the former deputy prime minister. You were very critical, or you have been very critical about him in the past. Now he's in the house, in the tent. Your thoughts?
No, I don't begrudge him. I wish him well. He has been in many tents. He has been in, when he was the Secretary General of KANU, he came to the tent of KANU. He stayed there for some time. He left on his own. He was in the tent with Kibaki. He left in circumstances that we all know. He is now in this tent. I have no doubt that he will leave it. So, I mean, I think he can enjoy as long as the party continues.
Pound for pound in that heavyweight fight, if it was Ruto versus Raila, who would take it?
Interesting. I mean, I don't like making predictions, but, you know, in Kenya, it's not just the person who is the head of the ticket. It's the coalition. It's the tribal coalition you bring. And one of the main factors that's not yet settled is, I mean, the future of Kenya is always settled 30–40% by central Kenya because of the population, because of the wealth, because of the education, because of the history. And that is still the wild card. Once we know where central will go, then there's a good chance we can predict where 2022 will go.
All right, so you're not going to give us a prediction. All right, Grand Mullah, before we take a break real quick, LSK, there's a new team in office right now. Before we take a break real quick, how do you think they're doing so far?
I think they're doing exceptionally well. This is the LSK we always wanted to have. It's the LSK we used to have, except when LSK slips with government without our consent. And I'm happy. I mean, I think they're doing very well.
All right. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions after the break. Chief Justice, his term is up next year, right? Supreme Court Judge Jack Tonujwang, this year should be retiring. Maybe the Grand Mullah wants to take a stab at it. We don't know.
He has been appointed to.
All right, we'll talk about that. Let's take a break. And also the judiciary. When are courts going to be opened, Grand Mullah? Your thoughts coming up. Keep tweeting. We'll read your tweets in a little short while. At Koinange Jeff, at Citizen TV Kenya, the hashtag. It's JK Live. JK Live takes a break. We're back with the Grand Mullah in a moment.